Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Rector of the University of Malaga, Professor José Ángel Narváez, and on my own behalf as head of the doctoral school, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you all here on the occasion of the opening of the 22 Conference of the European Society of Criminology. Challenges and opportunities in a virtually and physically connected Europe, the need for criminology. This is a very significant event that we are recommencing today after last year's cancellation. We are not in safe water yet, but after that dark period that had changed our life, we are able to restart. Now it's time to renew contacts and discuss issues of common interest. And I think the University of Malaga and the City of Malaga are probably the best places to do so. But none of this would be possible without the hard work of the Institute of Criminology, one of the jewels in the crown of our university. As you know, the Malaga Institute of Criminology is a pioneer in the criminological matter since its foundation 30 years ago. On this time, it has consolidated as a top national and international teaching and research center with excellent seniors and juniors professors. Furthermore, it is pleasant to note that the agenda of this conference covers a wide range of interesting topics. For example, gender crimes and justice, environmental crimes, culture of victimology, and investigation of mass crimes in war contexts, because we cannot forget what is happening in Ukraine. All these topics will be developed by internationally relevant speakers. It's my hope that this conference can achieve its objective in providing an effective forum for researchers and practitioners from around the world. The interest of the international scientific community is clear. The conference has attracted almost 2,000 participants from different countries. We will hear more than 1,500 oral presentations, and we'll have also the opportunity to see about 120 poster presentations. For this reason, my deepest gratitude goes to the organizing committee, especially to my colleague and still friend, Ana Isabel Cerezo Domínguez, as well as to the board of the European Society of Criminology, and of course, to all the persons who have directly and indirectly supported the success of this conference. And now, in order to comply with the program and without further delay, the president of the local organizing committee, Professor Ana Isabel Cerezo Domínguez, has the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magdalena, dear director, vice rector, and director of the PhD program. Katrien, welcome as a president of the European Society of Criminology, dean of my School of Law, Juan José Hinojosa, and dear Francisco de la Torre, the mayor of the city of Malaga. Welcome to all the authorities who are here with us. Thank you very much for staying here. Dear colleagues, welcome to the 22nd edition of the ESC annual meeting. Welcome to my country, welcome to Malaga, welcome to my university, and welcome to my School of Law. I hope you enjoy very much this conference. The slogan of this edition summarizes the main idea and purpose of this event: challenges and opportunities in a Europe connected virtually and physically, the need for criminology. When we were thinking about the slogan, we were thinking about this idea of movement, because the current criminological trends have much to do with virtual and real movements of people, migration and communication technologies. Both are social opportunities for growth, exchange, and enrichment, but at the same time present themselves as social and political challenges that reveal the best and worst of every society. Migration, for example, is not a new phenomenon at all, but the complexity and enormity of the challenge in our times is such that puts national and international systems to the limit of their capacities. The criminalization of migrants rests on a vague knowledge of a multifaceted problem, and many political discourses approach it without the vast knowledge that criminology has to offer. But nevertheless, whatever the official European or any national policies on migration, most of the countries will have to face or continue facing issues related to multiculturalism, integration, and social exclusion. The need for scientific knowledge and evidence about this topic is indeed urgent. And communication technologies, though a much more recent matter, constitute also a reason for great concern. The conference title has a deep connection with the current reality in an era when the new technologies have become a fundamental tool to develop many areas of our lives. Nevertheless, this tendency was not so relevant until the COVID pandemic broke out in 2020. The coronavirus, apart from creating a health, economic, and social crisis, an online conference of the ESC, has forced us to stay at home. In consequence, during those times marked by isolation and disease, technology has been the key in areas such as education, work, hobbies, or relationships, but with a remarkable change in the way of performing them. While technology was helping us to manage daily tasks, it was also destined for other purposes related to criminal activities. New devices enable criminals to create new manners to cause harm to society or improve those which already existed. The progressive connection between criminality and technology and its consequences in a pandemic context will be faced by criminology as a challenge to open new ways of analysis and research, reaching objectives unknown until this moment. Therefore, it has become necessary for European criminologists to establish a dialogue between different perspectives in order to build a discipline that may deal with the current social challenges, especially in terms of crime prevention and control. Thus, Europe needs to and will tackle both issues, migration and communication technologies, and criminology has to make its way to play a role on it. Virtual as well as physical interchange make Europe face the limits of its values, and agreements shaped in the form of human rights and freedom of movement as fundamental principles in the region. No doubt, proportionated and effective ways to tackle these tremendous challenges are needed, and criminology specifically should play a contention role. No other discipline can help as much as criminology to enable evidence-based criminal policy decisions, as well as calm and effective debates about these issues. The Institute of Criminology in Malaga invites European criminologists to reflect on these topics as the backbone of our complex societies with which many other topics of interest connect. This will be a space where attendees and speakers can share their ideas, knowledge, and innovate suggestions for improving different fields, such as opportunities for committing a crime or an online crime, for illegal migratory flows migration, or aspects related to criminal lawmaking policies and criminal justice, many of them. Nevertheless, we have disposed a huge range of topics, among those already exposed, with the goal of achieving a higher level of participation in different areas, and also pretending that criminology continues having interdisciplinarity and main characteristic. We will make very effort to offer the best environment to debate in an open and used to exchange city at the south of Europe. Indeed, Malaga is part of the southern border of Europe. It's the closest big city to Africa. And together with the rest of the country, it's also a crucial cultural and linguistic connector with Latin America. Two strategic factors that make Malaga the perfect place to host the Eurocrim 2022. I hope you enjoy it very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Annabelle. And now has the floor. You are president of the European Society of Criminology, that today is also our president. Catherine has the floor.
Thank you very much. Many thanks that I am given the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the European Society of Criminology. We know that many of you in Malaga have worked very hard and have been very committed to get this conference organized. I mention first Don Francisco de la Torre Prados, Mayor of the city of Malaga, for hosting our conference in this lively and energetic city. I thank Don Juan José Hinojosa, Montalvo, yeah? Almost, eh?
It's easier than Villiers.
Okay. Dean of the Faculty of Law, that one's right, who played a crucial role in making it all happen. Together with Doña Magdalena Martinez, Vice Rector and Director of the PhD program, for hosting us at your impressive university. I profusely thank Doña Anabel Ferrezo Dominguez, President of the local organizing committee, and of course her entire committee, for their vision and for the hard work that went into all this. They were even so effective in their communication and outreach that I heard that your king, His Majesty King Felipe VI, sent his well wishes to all of us. This conference is going to be a smasher. We never had as many registrations. 1,850, massively more than any previous conference. And of course, this is partly because people were conference hungry after 2 years of COVID. But people were also looking forward to visiting the Instituto de Criminologia that has played such a key role in the development of criminology in Spain. And of course, they were also looking forward to this beautiful area of Spain, this city with its museums, gorgeous food, and hospitality. I am sure that this conference will be remembered not only in our heads, but also in our hearts. Thank you.
Now the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Juan José Hinojosa, has the floor.
Thank you, Professor Martin Martinez, Vice Chancellor of our university. So, dear Professor Cerezo, and dear Mrs. Villovert, and dear Mayor de la Torre, and dear Vice President of the Audiencia Provincial of Malaga, to the Dean of the Judges of Malaga, to the Chief of the Guardia Civil in Malaga, dear members of the European Society of Criminology, ladies and gentlemen attending and participating in this 22nd conference of the European Society of Criminology, Eurocrim Malaga 2022. I would like to reiterate the welcome extended by the Professor Martin Martinez to the Faculty of Law, the main venue of this Eurocrim Malaga 2022 conference, which is also the Faculty of the Criminology Studies, together with the Andalusian Interuniversity Institute of Criminology, also directed by the President of this organizing committee, Professor Anabel Cerezo. And it is an honor to host this prestigious Congress of this prestigious scientific society. And allow me, I say, Mrs. President, that I am also extremely honored by the work done by the local organizing committee. I am convinced that the result of this Congress will be particularly useful to understanding the solutions that criminology offers to the numerous criminological problems that the two-dimensional world that has come down to us in Europe poses. And I could end here, but since I very much doubt that Professor Cerezo will be self-satisfied with the work done by her team, I will do so myself. I want to highlight the formidable work done by herself, by Professor Garcia España, and by Professor Becerra. I know well what I am talking about, because they approached me more than 4 years ago to anticipate what was to be and already is this beautiful reality. They have not been alone, but surrounded by an extraordinary team of teachers and researchers, collaborators and volunteers who have given this Congress a formal and overall familiar aspect, as you will have the opportunity to see and check. I would also like to highlight the enormous contribution of the academic master of all of them, Professor José Luis Díaz Ripollés, former director of the Institute and also former dean of this faculty. It is no secret to any of us that without his work over the last 35 years, this Congress would probably not be taking place here. So thank you, dear Professor Ripollés, for all you have given to the study of criminal law and criminology. To me, who have followed their work over the last 2 years, it has not seemed at all easy, but I must confess that they have had a very effective weapon that solves almost all problems. The immense love that they feel for their profession and the extraordinary faith they have in the social value of criminology. This is their merit because this is also their commitment, their personal commitment. Thank you very much for having achieved this. And ladies and gentlemen, well met in our faculty, now your faculty. Thank you.
And now, last but not least, has the floor our dear Mayor of the City of Málaga, Francisco de la Torre Prados.
Special microphone. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Magdalena Martinez, for your leadership of the University of Malaga, and especially for your contribution to the organization of this important conference. Greetings to my fellow speaker in this table, Jose Hinojosa Montalvo, Dean of Steve, Faculty of Law School. Greeting for to Katarina Bichbeller, President of European Society. Also greeting to Anabel Cerezo Dominguez, Director of the Malaga Institute of Criminology, but greeting also to dear Ripollet, founder of this institute, and also our President of the Provincial Court of Malaga, dear Lourdes. Greeting to Dean Youth, their friend. Also to Lieutenant Colonel of Operation of the Civil War in Malaga. Also for the Security Councilor of our municipality. They are participants of the European Crime Malaga 2022 conference. As the Mayor of Malaga, I would like to personally welcome you all to our city. I am happy to share with you all that Malaga is a modern, culturally rich, and sustainable city, which has created a dynamic, innovative ecosystem for entrepreneurs and multinational technology companies. In addition to the millions of tourists who visit our city each year, many people have found it the best place to live, to work, and to invest. The local culture is influenced by different civilizations that have passed through this area over the last 3,000 years. This city, which is the birthplace of Pablo Picasso and Antonio Banderas, is fortunate to have many historical sites, 39 museums, and is the gateway to the famous beach and Gulf region known as the Costa del Sol, or good Costa del Golf. Like this conference, our city has a clear international vision, intensified in recent years. As many as you know, we are a candidate to host an international exhibition called the Urban Era Towards the Sustainable City in 2027. Today, we are honored to be the host city to this year's conference, and we are delighted that the European Society of Criminology has returned to Spain after 10 years. More than 1,800 people from across Europe and other countries are participating in this conference during the next few days. Reviewing the schedule of event, I see that there will be very interesting discussion on this latest development of criminology, organized crime, drug trafficking, cybercrime, terrorism, and victimology, among other topics. During these difficult times, it is important to explore the challenges and opportunities in a virtually and physically connected Europe through the world of criminology. Congratulations to the European Society of Criminology, the Malaga Institute of Criminology, which recently celebrated its 30th anniversary, and the University of Malaga, the RDM, for organizing such a relevant event. I hope this day are productive and insightful for all the participants. At the same time, I hope you all are able to enjoy Malaga, its beautiful monument, its rich cultural heritage, friendly people, and delicious Mediterranean cuisine. Once again, bienvenidos a Málaga. Welcome to Málaga. Thank you very much.
So thanks again for being here with us in the city and in the University of Malaga. The organization of this Congress is almost perfect, I know. But in any case, I apologize for a possible inconvenience that could occur before, during, or after this event. I wish you an amazing stay in the university and the city of Malaga, and a productive and successful meeting. And I declare the conference open.
Okay. Can everybody hear me, also in the back?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Also up there? Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to start with the second part of the plenary, which is the substantive scientific part. I'm Katrien Bijleveld, President of the ESC. Again, a warm welcome and thanks very much for this impressive opening ceremony with so many important people from the area of Malaga. Very impressive. And we're going to have 3 speakers from now on. We're running a little bit late on time, so I hope we manage. I propose to do all the 3 speakers just one after the other, and if there's time left, we'll have some questions, and if there's no time left, we will have drinks in the botanical garden, which is also very nice, and you can contact us for any questions. So, I'm going to get started right away with my presidential address, and I hope it works with reading glasses and everything. Okay, so, officially, ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the European Society of Criminology, it is a source of great pleasure to stand before you and deliver this presidential address at the 22nd Conference of the European Society of Criminology. It appears so normal that this society exists, so completely ordinary, that we have a yearly European conference, a European Journal of Criminology, a newsletter. But it was not always like that. Before 2000, there was no European Society of Criminology. To go to conferences, we were faced with the distinctly odd situation that we, as European criminologists, would fly across the pond from the UK, Spain, Poland, or the Netherlands. We would fly to the USA, and we would meet up there. We would fly to Atlanta or Philly or some other big city, stay in hotels that were all essentially indistinguishable, in downtowns that were equally indistinguishable, attend the luncheon of the international division, have drinks with our European colleagues, and fly back. Also, as internationally oriented criminologists, we then submitted our articles to mainly US-based journals. There was little else, with criminology being the top one. And if you made it to criminology, you were like a star like Djokovic or Federer. And sometimes you would get reviews back on your analysis of Dutch or UK data, where reviewers would say, well, this is all very nice, but why don't you rerun your analysis on US data? And yeah, understandable from their point of view, but slightly weird for us. And if we were Djokovic or Federer, our article would get published eventually, and we would see it placed in between articles on things like the death penalty, on race, on prosecution of minors for the possession of small amounts of soft drugs, or on the large number of homicides committed with firearms. Issues largely out of sync with our European criminological reality. So, that we're having this European Society now, with its well-attended annual meetings, journal and newsletter, is actually a quantum jump for European criminology. Because even if Europe is a large and culturally diverse continent, we share, as European criminologists, a common outlook on our object of study on crime and law enforcement. That is so because, while we speak a multitude of languages, and while restaurant menus differ strongly from Georgia to Prague to Lithuania, with towns and countrysides having distinct characters, we are all bound by the legal framework of the Council of Europe, the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. This convention forbids the death penalty, an important anchor. It guarantees all citizens of the associated European countries an additional number of fundamental rights, such as to a fair trial. And while all countries have their own courts, we have one European court to which citizens have recourse in case they find that their fundamental rights have been breached. Of course, enough remains to complain, and recourse to the court and legal procedures is possibly lengthy and far from perfect, but the principles have been agreed upon, and they testify to a European outlook on the procedures with which we deal with crime and criminals. This is also reflected in the impressive and still expanding catalogue of standards for criminal justice set by the Council, such as, for example, the recommendations on the position of the victim in criminal proceedings and the tailored recommendations of the various monitoring bodies of the Council's secondary conventions. This common outlook is also revealed in the fact that, even though we do not have a single criminal code across the countries of the Council of Europe, there are marked similarities in crime and criminal justice policies. Homicide rates are generally low, and some of the smallest prison populations per capita are found in Europe. And since World War II raged on our continent and Jews and Roma were persecuted and murdered, there is a widespread allergy against terms like race associated with this crime of crimes. Firearms are generally not ubiquitous, and so firearm violence is generally low. Sex work is regarded and responded to in different ways, but very few countries in Europe still prosecute sex work. There are differences too, of course, very much tied to history and geography. All countries have their own criminal codes, and different codifications of the same behavior lead to the registration of different crimes. As an example, rape is codified differently in the Netherlands than it is in England and Wales. There are marked differences in how law enforcement is organized from country to country, a different role of the police and diverse implementation of the prosecution function. And sentences may vary quite a bit across countries. In some countries, a rapist may expect a prison sentence of about a year. In other countries, 10 years would be a quite regular sentence. Now, I started out by saying how wonderful it is that we have a European society, and stressed our European Convention, and mused a bit about our unique common European outlook on crime and law enforcement. But given all these differences that I just enumerated, can we state that it is possible that we are able to analyze European crime and law enforcement? Are we able to describe trends in criminal offending, prosecution, sentencing, etc.? Just like American criminologists can describe US crime rates, victimization, conviction rates. Do we actually have European data to do such European research? The answer is twofold, depending on what you're looking at. It is sort of and definitely not. In the following, I will first explain where I find that data are sort of available. I will argue that, in a sense, that sort of is unavoidable. Apart from our European Convention and Court of Human Rights, we simply have separate criminal codes per country. We have separate police forces, different cultures of punishment. This is a situation, and there are bound to be some synchronization issues. Next, I will focus on the definitely not. I will argue, and I will try to do so forcefully, that this no is unnecessary. And what is worse, it is in fact highly problematic, for various reasons that I will also elaborate on. I will therefore end with a plea for a European effort to turn that definitely not into a yes, we can. Let me start with a sort of. We know to a large extent what prosecution, conviction, and sentencing trends are across Europe. We know this because since 1996, a group of experts from all over Europe have been working on the so-called European Sourcebook project, started by the Council of Europe. In the first sourcebook, information had been collected from 36 European countries, covering the period 1990 to 1996, and the recent one, the sixth sourcebook, already covers the years 2011 to 2016. This sourcebook is, I cannot say it any less exuberantly, a magnificent and magnificently important undertaking. An intricate structure with authors and national correspondents has been working away on a very tight financial budget, I must say. The authors have managed to synchronize national data and publish these figures in a consistent way for an ever-increasing number of European countries. The last edition has data on police, prosecution, etc., and the data have been made freely available. That was the sort of story. We are, thanks to the sourcebook effort, able to paint a comparative and relatively comprehensive European picture of with synchronized criminal justice data. And that part is as good as it can possibly get. I now come to the definitely not part. And remember that I asked whether we have European data. That was my question. This not refers to the fact that we do not have data on crime trends. We do not have victimization, prevalence, or incidence data. We all know, I do not need to explain it to this audience, that police data are subject to the dark number. So we cannot glean from police data what crime trends are. In criminology, we have therefore, since the 70s, employed victimization surveys to circumvent this. And even though these have their own methodological issues, they are generally regarded the least problematic solution to overcome the dark number. But, some of you will say, a number of European countries have over the years employed national victim surveys, right, to estimate trends in offending, haven't they? Yes, they have. But, firstly, this applies only to a small set of countries. Only 14 jurisdictions, and that's 12 countries, have held regular victimization surveys. And some of these countries have in fact recently terminated them. Another 19 have held incidental or partial victimization surveys. Of course, the International Crime Victim Survey was carried out a number of times in a number of European countries. And this ICVS provides a measure of 10 common crimes to which the general public is exposed, including relatively minor and also more serious crimes. However, sample sizes are small. And again, the last survey was carried out 18 years ago. So we are looking at a puzzle in which many pieces are missing. But there's more. Because even if we had lots of national surveys, we know that national surveys employ their own methodologies in sampling, in interview mode, in questionnaire and question design. And we know that this generates method-related differences. We will then see that prevalence rates between countries will differ simply because the methodologies differ. And even in the same countries, methodologies are regularly adapted. So, this means that with the current constellation, with a small and decreasing number of countries administering victim surveys, we are unable to garner valid European data on crime rates. Even if we had all the country pieces, we would still not be able to put together a fitting puzzle. We are looking at a European data desert. Now, I see all of you grabbing your handkerchiefs and, taking away tears because of what I just said. Could this lamentable situation be overcome? Yes, it can. It is very well technically possible to collect European victimization data. Just like the ICVS, the International Crime Victimization Survey, employed one methodology with some local adaptations, so would we be able to design an ECVS, a European Crime Victimization Survey. I understand that politicians appear to think that victimization surveys are costly, but this is demonstrably not the case. Also, it may require some negotiating skills to decide on an institution or a group of institutions who are going to administer these surveys. And lastly, policymakers and politicians may be wary that the ECVS may paint a different picture of victimization in their country than their national victimization survey does. But none of these are insurmountable. If the USA, with its state-dependent criminal laws, can do it, why not Europe? A European crime victimization survey would give us baseline data on crime trends across Europe and enable us to test and compare empirically, for example, the efficacy of different criminal policies, And they would most likely be the only feasible source for measuring cybercrime, which is still very much the elephant in the room in discussions on crime trends. They would also make visible crime victimization in European countries that suffered atrocities due to war. And we can think of current and less recent examples. But some of you will say that we all know that victimization surveys are not a panacea either. We know that some crimes are underreported, forgotten, and so-called victimless crime cannot be measured by them. Criminologists have therefore since the mid-20th century also advocated the use of self-report surveys, where you ask people whether they committed crimes. And the ISRD has developed a format for such surveys for juveniles. So, if an ECVS would be implemented, self-report questions could easily be attached, and should be attached to expand the coverage of criminal acts, making clever and efficient use of the existing sampling and surveying machinery. We would then have an ECS, a European Crime Survey. There's an additional reason why I believe we should all work towards such a survey, and that reason is that the European Union, building from a Council framework decision, took important steps in 2012 to improve and guarantee crime victims' rights through a Victims' Rights Directive. On top of this, an EU strategy was launched. The EU has clear policy goals here, and it is highly laudable that the EU attempts to improve the aftermath of crime victimization. The Council of Europe is also developing victims' rights recommendations. However, baseline data on crime victimization are altogether missing for most member states. It is therefore impossible to assess whether directives, strategies, or recommendations deliver their intended impact. You probably see where I'm heading, because in addition to adding questions on victimization and perpetration of crimes, the ECVS machinery could and should be extended with a module that also assesses what services any victims received, whether these met their needs, etc. In that manner, the ECVS could assess the extent to which crime victims actually see their EU guaranteed and Council of Europe recommended rights realized. It would give the 90 million Europeans who fall victim to crime annually a voice. It would be an important instrument for gathering baseline data, innovative in its combination of victimization and perpetration data, and of immediate policy relevance for effectively addressing European victims' needs. Given the time that has elapsed since all these recommendations and directives, there would seem by now to be a fairly pressing need for a monitoring tool. Continuation of the current situation bears the risk that European victim policies and recommendations do not rise above the level of nicely wrapped good intentions. Victims deserve better. The ESC is celebrating its 22nd birthday. It is striking that the negotiations for the Council framework decision that I just referred to started almost in the same period, in early 2000. A period also in which this society was launched. So many things were happening then. If we, as a European Society of Criminology, would put our weight behind it, and if we would be able to help institutionalize an ECVRS, we would also, after all the other good that the ESC has brought, deliver on an additional promise for European criminology and criminal justice policy. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. This is my turn to talk about criminology in Spain I'm going to be very brave and very brief. Only 10 minutes, no more, to talk about criminology in my country. The expansion of criminological studies in Spain nowadays is noticeable. An increasing number of Spanish universities are offering official curricula in criminology, despite its use as an undergraduate program. Was in 2009. 2009 marked a significant event with introduction of this undergraduate degree in criminology, adding Spain to the handful of European countries with criminology studies at every level of higher education. The duration of the bachelor nowadays is 4 years, while the master's varies between 1 or 2 years. The curricula, as in Europe, most of the universities in Europe is shaped by the Spanish criminological tradition, not in Europe, in Spain. It includes lectures on criminology, on crime prevention, victimology, on criminal policy, on forensic medicine, research methods in social sciences, quantitative and qualitative research methods in criminology, criminal law, procedural criminal law, forensic psychology, sociology of crime, and so on. Despite the scant job opportunities offered to criminology graduates, which tend to be limited to the areas of security forces, victim assistance offices, penitentiary institutions, and juvenile justice system, these degrees are enjoying surprising popularity. Who has not dreamed once in his life of studying criminology? Thus, Spanish criminology is slowly opening to new paradigms and professional markets as a response to the increasing demands and preoccupations in security matters. But not only. During the last years, Spain is increasingly overcoming these limitations, as it shows an ever-growing number of positions in fields like mediation and restorative justice, for example, crime prevention in companies, in public administration, in schools, for instance. These are changing times in terms of job opportunities. No doubt that the possibilities of opening the labor market for criminologists in Spain depend on the knowledge and tools that we are able to create. However, despite the popularity of criminology among students, despite the several bachelor's and master courses we are able to offer, Spanish criminology remains categorical obstacles, like the persistent structural problems and the limited autonomy of the field. Thus, the institutional background is still shaped by traditional disciplinary boundaries. There are hardly any professors of criminology with the background in criminology, because courses are taught by academics from other disciplines, criminal law, sociology, psychology, where criminological issues play a marginal role. But the main problem in Spanish criminology, from my point of view, is that the emphasis has always been on education, which was rarely supported by empirical research. This began to change 25 years ago, I have to tell you. A unique feature is the small number of researchers who, despite the numerous difficulties to obtain official statistics as well as funding, regularly conduct significant research and are active in academic societies. Nonetheless, criminology has experienced, during the last 25 years, a non-stop growth. Seminars and conferences on general and specific topics are continuous all over my country. Actually, one of the proof is that it's the third time that Spain is going to host Eurocrim. The first one was in Toledo in 2002. 10 years later was in Bilbao in 2012, and 10 years later now is in Spain for the third time in Malaga here now in 2022. Spain has also several academic journals specialized in criminology and related fields, but none have a considerable international prestige, but they have nevertheless contributed to the dissemination of criminological knowledge at national and international level, especially to South America, in South America. The creation of the Spanish Society of Criminological Research in 2000 was especially significant, with the founding purpose of promoting criminological research. Its objective is to bring together a group of researchers and experts in criminology, regardless of their origin and position in the field. It intends to serve as a communicative bridge among scientists, thus promoting the transfer of research findings into points of convergence, dissemination, and discussion at both national and international levels. This society has jointly impulsed high-quality research throughout these years and has led to a set of consolidated groups and centers focused on a wide range of topics in most of Spanish regions. Let me highlight some of these universities, some of the groups that are working nowadays in Spain. Many of you know these groups. Groups from Albacete, from Barcelona, from Cádiz, Elche, Girona, Granada, Lleida, Madrid, San Sebastián, Bilbao, Sevilla, Valencia, from Malaga too. And let me name some of the professors who have driven these groups. Cristina Rechea, Elena Larrauri, José Luis Díez Ripollés, José Luis de la Cuesta, Pepe Cid, Santiago Redondo, Vicente Garrido, Fernando Miró, Pérez Tangelan, some years ago, Rosemary Barberet, I hope she's here around, Antonio Andrés Puello, Josep María Tamarit, César San Juan, many of them. To conclude, Spanish criminology has experienced dramatic developments in the last 25 years. Research groups and institutes are abounding, and most universities offer nowadays curricula in criminology. It is now an established discipline in Spanish academic life, one that is extremely popular with students, as I told you. But despite these achievements, two major problems remain. One, I told you before, is the non-functional use of diplomas in criminology in the labor market. We have many devoted students, and we do our best to prepare them for a wide range of hypothetical jobs. But how successful criminologists will prove to be on the labor market still remains to be seen. The second is the weak autonomy of our discipline. I'm highlighting again the same idea because for us it's very important. Issues of crime and crime control are considered marginal in the related disciplines. Yet criminologists remain simultaneously engaged with other disciplines. The lack of autonomy is partly an institutional problem, but also an epistemological one. Despite these problems, I still believe that the future is bright. As criminology in Spain is youthful and energetic, thanks in large part to the upcoming generation and their promising research. So Spanish criminology is at a crucial time. Its scientific performance, its academic relevance, its capacity to play a solvent role in facing social problems. All of this is continuously being tested by the public and Eurocrim held in one of the centers that supported criminology since many years ago, since 1989, the Andalusia Inter-University Institute of Criminology would send a strong message to every social, political, or academic actor in our country. So this is the perfect time. This is the perfect place to celebrate Eurocrim 2002. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anabel Ferreso, for a very interesting reflection on Spanish criminology. I'll sure be talking about it a lot during the conference. Our last speaker, we're very honored to have you, Caroline Fournet, from the University of Exeter, and you're going to talk about burying the dead, but not the facts. And you're going to stand here, right? Or are you going to stay seated?
I was told to stay seated.
Oh, it is up to you, whatever you want.
This, use it. Thank you. No. Yes. Good afternoon, evening. Thank you very much to the board of the European Society of Criminology for inviting me to give this lecture. It's a real honor, it's a real privilege for me to be here. The microphone is not very nice, shall I do like this? Thank you also to the European Criminology Group on Atrocity Crimes and Transitional Justice for having me as a member, even though I have to confess after these two impressive addresses that I'm not a criminologist, so I feel a little bit like a fraud addressing an audience of experts in criminology. I'm a legal scholar. It happens. So today I'm going to talk about, my address is entitled Bury the Dead, Not the Truth, Identifying the Dead and Unearthing the Truth in Context of Mass Violence. I've started working on this issue of corpses of mass violence a bit over 10 years ago. I was part of an ERC project led by anthropologist Elisabeth Anstedt and Holocaust historian. Try to talk with you. Is that? Otherwise, I can speak really loudly.
Now it should work? Yeah.
Yes, now it works. Thank you. If this is too loud, just raise your hands. So co-led by Elisabeth Anstedt and Holocaust historian Jean-Marc Dreyfus. The idea of this The idea of this research group was to have a look. Can you hear me that way?
Everything.
No. Okay, I'll try like this.
Keeps on staying on.
People are leaving. Apologies.
Just talk on.
The idea behind this project was to investigate what happens to the dead after mass violence and armed conflicts. Because it is indeed one of the material consequences of mass violence and of armed conflict that we are going to have a production en masse of dead bodies. So what happens to the dead? How do we deal with these dead bodies? So to address this in a bit less than 20 minutes, I'll talk a little bit about the law, but not too much, I promise. A little bit about case law. Obviously, I'll talk about Ukraine because it's very topical and very current. But throughout, you will see that the issue of the dead, of atrocities, and of armed conflict everywhere and whenever they happened are a very current issue. The dead are not something of the past. Now, of course, all the eyes are focused on Ukraine right now, but Ukraine is not the only place, far from it, where the issue of dead bodies is a very topical one. And then I'll finish by talking a little bit about the challenges posed by dead bodies and a series of questions to which, I better warn you, I don't have the answers. So first, what does the law tell us about what to do with the dead generated by atrocities and or armed conflict? So if we turn to the law of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, what does it tell us? It's Geneva Convention 3 on prisoners of war tells us that the prisoners of war who have died in captivity are to be honorably buried. So this idea of burial. Likewise, and it says this on different occasions. It also says deceased prisoners of war shall be buried in individual graves. Geneva Convention 4, relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war, again repeats this idea that the dead need to be honorably buried in individual graves. It, however, specifies that bodies may be cremated only for imperative reasons of hygiene on account of the religion of the deceased. But the idea is for honorable burial. With respect to victims of international armed conflicts, the law tells us that the remains of persons who have died shall be respected, and the grave sites of all such persons shall be respected, maintained, and marked. So again, this idea of burial and of grave sites. The additional protocol dealing with victims of non-international armed conflicts here poses an obligation to search for the dead, prevent their being disposed, and decently dispose of them. So we sort of suppose that maybe decent disposal will also mean honorable burial. Now, there are also a number of guidelines and protocols. Fairly recently, the Bournemouth Protocol on Mass Grave Protection and Identification from 2020. More recently, 2022, the ICRC's Guiding Principles for Dignified Management of the Dead in Humanitarian Emergencies and to Prevent Them from Becoming Missing Persons. The idea behind these guidelines and protocols is to make sure that the mass graves are protected as crime scenes, that the bodies of the victims are preserved, protected as potential evidence. This is to facilitate the collection of forensic evidence, so here forensic anthropology, forensic pathology, so evidence obtained through scientific testing. And ultimately, the idea is to facilitate prosecutions, bearing in mind that there might be, in the future, a judicial assessment of the admissibility and the veracity of the forensic evidence. So this evidence must be properly collected. It has to be admissible afterwards before judges to count as evidence in future prosecutions. And this is something, obviously, that resonates with what we are reading now about Ukraine. Now, and indeed, to quote Clyde Snow, world-renowned forensic anthropologist, bones are often our last and best witnesses. They never lie and they never forget. And it's true, in the aftermath of atrocities, including armed conflict, the victims' remains can reveal who the victims were, how they died, when they died, what happened to them both before and after their death. So this, in that sense, forensic evidence can help reconstruct the sequence of events. In court, the medico-legal analysis of these remains can be used to determine the criminality of the death, to qualify the crime, and to demonstrate the perpetrator's intent. In practice, this means that the places where victims are found are crime scenes. Forensic investigators sometimes call them forensic gold mines. And these places could/should be investigated. So what does international criminal law actually say? Well, not much. But we have case law. At the International Criminal Court, there is this sort of position that there is no need to find or identify corpses of victims to trigger investigation or to trigger prosecutions. And in the Bemba Gombo case, the pretrial chamber found that in case of mass crimes, it may be impractical to insist on a high degree of specificity. So it's not necessary for the prosecutor to demonstrate for each individual killing the identity of the victim and the direct perpetrator. And having a look at the case law before the International Criminal Court, the prosecution has resorted to a sampling strategy. So the prosecution has not proceeded in places where they were investigating to full exhumations followed by full identification. Why? Because it's impossible. So the prosecution has used samples, which already you can see will be tricky before a court of law, because how are samples going to prove mass crimes? But this is what the prosecution has been doing, and it's probably what it will do if it continues co-investigating what's happening in Ukraine. This is slightly different from what we saw before at the ICTY. So I'm going to switch focus from the International Criminal Court to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And there's a reason for this. The reason is that in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in the aftermath of the conflict, there was an unprecedented scientific search for the dead victims. This has so far remained a sole occurrence. And to give you an idea of numbers, for Srebrenica only, so only for the Srebrenica genocide, by 30th of June 2022, 7,015 out of the 8,372 victims of the Srebrenica genocide had been identified, 6,979 by DNA identification, and 36 by more traditional methods, so for example, their clothes. Now, what is interesting with respect to what happened in Bosnia-Herzegovina is investigators were sent. As is often the case, they found mass graves. They started analyzing the content of the mass graves, and very rapidly they realized something that non-forensic experts wouldn't have seen. They realized that the bodies of the victims were not complete. And they continued analyzing the different mass graves, and then with the development of DNA from 2001, systematically they identified the different remains that they were finding, and they realized that they were finding the same individual in different places. And this, coupled with satellite imagery, notably from the US intelligence, actually revealed that the perpetrators had used a pattern of mass graves. What I mean by this is that, on the first instance, the perpetrators buried in mass graves their victims. And at some point in the conflict, they came back with equipment like bulldozers to disturb the grave, remove part of it, and create a secondary grave somewhere else. And sometimes they repeated the process again. So this means that one individual could be found in different places. So you see, when I go back to, when I go to the numbers here of the victims for Srebrenica only, who have been identified, they also have been reconstructed. So it's a very long forensic work, forensic search, but in the end, they are finding the victims, they are reconstructing them, and then they are giving them back to their families for burial according to their tradition and religious beliefs. Now, in the case law, the tribunal, from the very first case that dealt with Srebrenica, i.e. the Kristic case, the tribunal devoted quite a large part of its judgment to forensic evidence. And what's key here is that the tribunal relied on the forensic evidence to show that the bodies which were found in the mass graves were civilians. And that again will resonate with what we are reading currently about the Ukraine. From day one, the perpetrators of the Srebrenica genocide, but also of other crimes perpetrated in Bosnia-Herzegovina, have argued that the corpses found in mass graves were combat victims. And thanks to the forensic evidence presented in court, the judges were able to understand that these were not combat victims, that they were civilians. So forensic evidence here was key. A, to unveil the pattern of mass graves, and here the chamber said there would have been no need to create this pattern of mass graves if the majority of the bodies in the primary graves had been combat victims. In the Mladic case, this was also the line of defense. So in the very last case before the tribunal, the defense continuously argued that the victims were combatants, that they were not civilians. And again, the forensic evidence presented allowed the judges to understand that the victims were civilians. The forensic analysis revealed that they were wearing usual clothes with jewelry, money, everyday items normally carried on a person. And in different examinations of different forensic experts, like Fridi Pecorelli, he testified that a lot of the bodies had blindfolds around their heads. And this meant that these were not combat victims. There was nothing, as he said, that I found that would lead me to believe that this was a result of combat. And of course, this idea of blindfolds around the head, again, resonates with what we are reading about Ukraine. Forensic pathologist John Clark also testified that people were wearing ordinary clothing. There were no military clothing. And that the huge majority of victims died by gunshots. And 45% of all the shots were to the back of the head. Now, in situations of combat, this is extremely rare. So this actually showed that the victims had been summarily executed. And again, without this forensic analysis, the judges wouldn't have known this. We wouldn't be able to access this information. And again, this sort of matches what we are reading right now in Ukraine and shows the importance of the forensic analysis of the bodies found in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, just like probably every country on the planet, it's not the first occurrence of atrocities in Ukraine. We've all read about the massacre of Babi Yar in September 1941, the first sort of occurrence of the Holocaust by bullets. More recently, the forensic searches in Ukraine following the downing of flight MH17 in July 2014. And right now, following Russia's invasion, what we are reading about Mariupol, about Bucha, with again victims with gunshot wounds to the head, with the hands tied, the knees tied. And just last week, the mass grave found in Izium, civilian victims with evidence of torture, in fact, including torture tools, and with satellite imagery to corroborate the forensic findings and counter fake news claims that are already arriving. And the claim made by Russia that this is fake news. So indeed, for Ukraine, forensic evidence can be used to corroborate victims and witness accounts when there will be prosecutions. I'm being optimistic here. To determine the accurate number of victims, the cause and time of death, to identify the victims, to identify the link with the perpetrators, to reconstruct the sequence of events. But forensic evidence doesn't come without its challenges, and there are logistical, contextual, forensic, political, economic, historical, humanitarian, legal, judicial, ethical, social, cultural, funerary, religious challenges, and this is only to name a few. There are limits to forensic evidence. There are challenges on the ground, locating the dead, exhuming the the dead, reconstructing and possibly re-inhuming. And there are reports about Ukraine rather similar to what we could read about Bosnia-Herzegovina, about the lack of means, about the lack of resources, about the lack of storage. And again, collecting forensic evidence can take time. It needs to be done properly if the evidence is to be admissible before a court of law. In time of conflict, this can be extremely difficult to do. So there are a number of challenges. There are limits to forensic knowledge and evidence, simply because not everything can be explained. There can be mistakes and difficulties that stop and prevent forensic knowledge and evidence. And there can be challenges in the courtroom because scientists do not speak the same language as legal practitioners. So lawyers and judges need to know how to approach this type of evidence. They need to understand that this evidence will not offer all the answers. And yet, forensic search is extremely important. In spite of all these challenges, forensic search and exhumations followed by identification can help to put back names on the victims. It's a way maybe to bring closure to the families of the victims. They also constitute a clear message to the perpetrators that they can't wipe this person's existence. They can ultimately be agents of the truth and contribute to determine what happened exactly. So forensic search, in spite of the challenges, is key. And that brings me to concluding remarks, and I'm going back to the beginning with my title, Bury the Dead, Not the Truth. And indeed, as I have sort of tried to show, there can be a correlation between the dead and the truth. In the aftermath, as I started this address, in the aftermath of mass violence, there's a mass production of dead bodies, and in fact, we would probably struggle to find a place on this planet where the issue has not arisen at some point. I'm also very aware that I'm talking in a country where, just like in so many other countries, the dead victims of past conflicts have been at the heart of societal debates. This is somehow inevitable. And the bodies of the victims can act as agents of the truth. There's a truth imperative. We need to find the truth. The bodies of the victims can act as agents of memory. There's an imperative of memory. We need to remember. But who decides of these imperatives? Now, bury the dead, not the truth, was actually words that were inscribed on a popular Rwandan T-shirt following the 1994 genocide. In Rwanda, following the genocide, there were some exhumations. There was no identification en masse, as we could have seen in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And in fact, the remains of the victims have been used, have been displayed in museums in the name of memory. And I think we've all seen the images of the skulls nicely disposed. I don't have this image here. I'm not taking a moral high ground. Sometimes I show the image, sometimes I don't. Why? Because actually this image is important in terms of transfer of knowledge, in terms of talking about what is happening to the dead victims. At the same time, it shows an image of mass violence that is not quite right. It's very sanitized, it's very clean, it's very neat. And of course, these human remains, and I think we have in the head the image of the skulls, they are individuals. And the families probably wanted them back, wanted identification, wanted to bury them according to their rights and culture. And we find this burial imperative also in the law. But if we turn to other cases, in cases as well where the remains are displayed, I'm thinking here of Cambodia, and again, we probably have the image of the stupa, where the skulls and different parts of the body are nicely presented, but there's no identification whatsoever. The exhumations and the burials might not match at all the wishes of some of the victim communities. For some of them, actually, you shouldn't exhume, you shouldn't touch the dead. Where they fall is where they should be left. And if you do actually touch them, you should maybe cremate them. So there's no sign of burial anywhere. So what happens then? Should investigations, including exhumations, forensic analysis, be conducted, all in the name of truth and memory and justice? And indeed, when we talk about dead bodies, when we see dead bodies, suddenly there's outrage. And the images we saw from Izium last week prompted reiterated calls on the part, notably, of the EU for an international tribunal. But should we, and Izium set aside, but more generally, should we conduct investigations when they do not match the culture of the victim community? Isn't there a risk of cultural neutralization or even cultural destruction if we satisfy these higher imperatives of truth, memory, and world justice? Shouldn't then the only thing the international community do is precisely do nothing? What would it look like if we did nothing? There is, after all, something rather disturbing in witnessing the international community, which is more often than not standing by while atrocities are being committed, before deciding to intervene and to then send investigators who might not be at all familiar with the culture of the country where they are sent, and who will interfere with an extremely intimate part of the society, i.e., its dead. So search for, identify, and bury the dead, yes, when it's done according to the culture of the victims, and when it is what their relatives, their community actually want. This should be the higher imperative. So thinking about it, probably my title was not that good, so maybe a better title, admittedly less catchy, but better could have been Care for the Dead, Care for the Truth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very impressive talk and very fitting to everything we see happening in the world around us and in some countries particularly. Feels a little bit strange to now invite you to a nice drinks party, but nevertheless I'm going to do that. We have a welcome reception at the Botanical Garden just across the street, and I would invite you all to go there, and if there's any questions you want to ask one of the speakers, feel free. Thank you so much again.
you.